Let's talk about the UK's economy, because you see, there's a story of two Britons. One is this glittering global hub of incredible wealth, pretty much all packed into London. But the other, well, the other is the rest of the country, and for them, things are a lot tougher. To really get it, we need to start with a single massive number. 215,700. Just let that sink in. That's how many millionaires are living in London right now. It paints a pretty clear picture, right? A city that's basically a playground for the super rich. But that concentration of wealth, it's only one half of a very, very divided story. And this is where it gets really shocking. If you look at disposable income, the actual money people have in their pocket after taxes, the average person in the UK is officially worse off than someone living in any of the 5 poorest states in the US. It's a staggering comparison. And here it is, the number that explains just about everything. If you just take London and the wealthy southeast out of the UK's economy, the whole country's GDP per capita drops by a massive 14%. This isn't just a small gap, you guys, it's a chasm. So how on earth did one of the world's most powerful nations get so broken? Well, to understand that, we have to go back, way back, to 1979 and the election of Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. She walked into office with one single overarching mission: to absolutely crush the wild, out-of-control inflation that was tearing the country apart. So what was the plan? Well, her government went all in on a pretty hardcore economic theory called monetarism. It was basically a three-pronged attack. First, you choke off the supply of money that's sloshing around the economy. Second, you make borrowing money insanely expensive by jacking up interest rates. And third, you take a hatchet to government spending. And boy, they did not mess around. These policies were rolled out with brutal speed. Interest rates just shot up, hitting a historic 17% in a matter of months. Now, if you're a business, especially a factory that needs loans to operate, those kinds of borrowing costs weren't just difficult. They were a death sentence. So the big question is, did it work? And the answer is a very complicated yes, but. On the one hand, the shock therapy did what it was supposed to do. Inflation plunged from over 13% down to 5%. But the price, wow. The cost was astronomical. Britain's entire industrial backbone was hollowed out. And at the peak of the crisis, 100,000 people were losing their jobs every single month. And this, right here, is where the UK's economy truly splits in two. While all these old manufacturing towns across the north, Scotland, and Wales were just collapsing, London, with its totally different service-based economy, was gearing up for an unbelievable boom. It was literally the tale of two economies. You can see it clear as day in the numbers from the mid-'80s. In the old industrial heartlands, unemployment skyrocketed past 15%, but down in London and the southeast, it barely nudged 10%. The country was literally fracturing along economic and geographic lines. The rocket fuel for London's boom was a policy with a very fitting name: the Big Bang. In 1986, the Thatcher government basically took a stick of dynamite to the old, stuffy rules of London's financial district. They scrapped regulations left and right, all to turn the city into the undisputed financial capital of the world. And it worked. International banks flooded in, and a new age of high finance was born. Now, here's the catch. Swapping factory jobs for banking jobs looked great for GDP, but it secretly baked more inequality into the system. It all comes down to something called the job multiplier effect. Think of it like this. For every 100 jobs at a steel mill, the local pubs, shops, and suppliers support another 900 jobs. But for every 100 jobs in banking, it only supports about 200 other jobs. The new economy just supported way fewer people. So on paper, Britain was booming. GDP per person jumped by 30% under Thatcher. But look at the Gini coefficient. That's the key stat for measuring inequality. It exploded by 40%. The country as a whole got richer, sure, but that new wealth was funneled into far fewer hands, creating a much, much more unequal nation. So that brings up an obvious question, right? If all the jobs and all the money are in London, why don't people from poorer areas just pack up and move there? Well, the simple answer is they can't. London isn't an escape hatch. For most people, it's a trap. And here's why. Before you pay rent, a London salary looks pretty good, about 14% higher than the national average. But then, reality hits. Once you pay London's absolutely insane housing costs, that 14% advantage evaporates. It shrinks all the way down to just 1%. For the vast majority of people, there's just no financial reason to move. And the human toll of this housing crisis is just heartbreaking. A full 2% of London's population is considered homeless. Now compare that to other huge global cities. New York is at 0.8%, Paris is at 0.3%, London is in a totally different and much worse league. So what's pouring gasoline on this fire? A huge factor is foreign investment. In the first quarter of this year, a mind-boggling 27% of all homes sold in London were bought by foreign buyers. Compare that to New York, where it's just 0.3%. That is a 90 times difference. No wonder prices are through the roof. This huge economic divide didn't just happen by accident. It wasn't just market forces. It has been actively shaped and reinforced for decades by government policy. The real question is, where has all the public money been going? Well, just look at transport spending. For every person in London, the government invests nearly £1,200. Now look at the Northeast, just 430 quid. Or the East Midlands, a mere 350. Someone did the math. The north of England would have gotten an extra £140 billion if it had been funded at the same level as London. Okay, I want you to really let this next fact sink in. Not a single UK region north of London has a GDP per capita that is higher than the UK average. Not one. Every single region is poorer than the national average. That one sentence tells you everything you need to know about the scale of this problem. And it's not just trains and buses. You see the exact same pattern in crucial spending like research and development. London gets £60 per person. The North gets just 21. This creates a vicious cycle, right? The region that's already ahead gets all the investment it needs to pull even further away from everyone else. Decades ago, Prime Minister Tony Blair said this. He talked about shaking the kaleidoscope and reordering the world. It's a quote full of optimism and the promise of change. But looking back at everything we've seen today, you have to ask, for whose benefit was the UK really reordered? And that's the real tragedy in all of this. The UK still has all the ingredients it needs to be prosperous for everyone. But as long as opportunity is basically hoarded in one city, that promise is going to remain broken for millions of people. So we have to end with a really tough question. It's one that challenges the country's very name. If a kingdom's wealth, its future, its very destiny, is all locked up in one single city, is it still really a united kingdom?